theories, any one site is actually usually covering many different conspiracy theories, and then the same theories are actually present across multiple different sites. And they don't always make sense together. A lot of them are even conflicting, and they actually tie together themes that might appeal to people on the far right or the far left, and even some places in between. Sunstein and Vermeulen have done some fantastic research on conspiracy theories, and they talk about how people that have experienced one conspiracy theory are more likely to believe in another one, and also that they get this sort of crippled epistemology where you're thinking about things, you're not processing information in a way that's, well, the way that you're processing information is going to make you get into these places. And a part of that I see is happening as a false triangulation where people are going to different sites thinking that they're seeing different information, and actually the same information is being placed in different sites. So in this case, if I went to look at this activist post, I could actually see a lot of times they weren't writing their own articles, but they were just copying huge excerpts from other places and creating an article out of that. And then before its news would just copy and paste a whole article from activist post into its environment. So you're actually getting sort of astroturf in this alternative news ecosystem. And a person going in, oh, I'm going to do research on GMOs, you might think that you're seeing 3 or 4 different opinions on different places, and in reality you're getting the same story just spit out in different formats. Another piece of this was there was a lot of political propaganda, and I went in very naively looking at sort of a US left versus right, and what I found was that really didn't apply in these spaces, or it was very disrupted. But in all of these spaces, the themes were kind of converged around something that was very different for me. I now understand it a lot better, but I didn't understand it then. But they converged around this thing called anti-globalism. And globalism could mean anything from anti-immigration, so that's appealing to someone from like traditional like right-leaning things. It also could mean anti-globalization, against exploitation of markets in developing countries, right? So the combination of those things meant that globalism served as a boogeyman to bring in people from different kinds of political views. And in some places it was explicit that the opposite of globalism was nationalism, and in some places it was, some of these online sites, it wasn't as explicit. But that was the dimension that they were working on and kind of appealing to. Another really compelling piece of this was how they were, these alternative media sites had set themselves up as counterpoints to corporate media, which makes sense, that's sort of their purpose, but also that they were co-opting critical thinking in a really interesting way. So one of the themes that showed up again and again were sort of anti-corporate media, anti-media, and I want to give you an example here. You might not be able to read it, so I'm going to read it, of one of the sites. But this same thing appeared across many sites. If you looked at the About page, the 21st century is the beginning of a new information epoch, and you, the reader, are the freshman class of free and critical thinkers in a new and dynamic information age. In its totality, there is an immense volume of information to be had on the internet, but we truly believe that in this new, decentralized, grassroots, and egalitarian World Wide Web, the cream will eventually rise to the top, but this can only be achieved by keeping this internet neutral and free from excessive government and corporate control. I think many of us in this room would believe in that kind of rhetoric. We think we would, that it might appeal to us, this might appeal to our students. This site actually propagated all of these theories, everything except selling nutritional supplements, which makes me think that it's a political site and not a financial site. But they were propagating all of these different conspiracy theories. And so people that are going into these sites, they're like, yeah, I'm gonna just see the facts and I'm gonna make up my own mind. The site's telling me, okay, come here, we're gonna give you the facts, you can make up your own mind. And in reality, they're seeing these very confusing narratives. And the last piece I want to talk about is disinformation. I've been using this term in reference to my online rumoring and misinformation work for a long time. I had no idea what it meant until after writing an initial draft of this paper, circulating it around, and then people were pointing me to research on actual disinformation strategies, most of them based on sort of Russian state techniques. From Pomerantsev and Weiss, you get this definition that the purpose of disinformation is not to convince. The purpose of disinformation is to confuse, to create muddled thinking across society. And that begins to explain why all these sort of, the juxtaposition of all these different kinds of theories that don't always make sense together. The purpose isn't to sell an ideology, it's to get people to start distrusting media and to distrust evidence and to be just confused about what's going on so much that they just give up. And so for this crowd, I've been thinking about what would be really interesting as a question to throw out for the collective intelligence community. And that's when I keep being asked by folks, and which pieces of this, so we've got some evidence that some of those websites in my graph have connections to Putin, Russia state things. They also have some are connected to Iran and some other places. So there are some state actors within that graph. But there's also emergent behavior. Like this guy that, an hour after the Boston Marathon bombings, he thinks it's a false flag and he's going to send this out into the world, right? So this stuff is kind of going on its own, and even if you take out the state actors right now, I think that a lot of this behavior is still going to happen, right? So these questions of which part are just, coming from the ground up, which are, being sort of, which stories are being fed in, and where these things are resonating with each other to create this very confusing information space is important. I've just started to talk about like different kinds of motivations from different actors. Between the sort of true believers that are these, that just want to throw, this is what they believe in, that's what they're going to sell you. People that are financially motivated, people that have a political agenda, and then people that are just doing it for the lulz or entertainment mischief. But I think we can kind of maybe start to delve into these kind of distinctions and make distinctions between different parts of this system, which I think could be helpful for understanding it, although I don't have any solutions for dampening some of this behavior. Anyways, my last question is just how do these pieces fit together, and what's going on, and what can we kind of do as academics to better understand it, and then to start thinking about how we might help people fight off this disinformation, or fight off this conspiratorial thinking, or I don't know, be better information consumers in this environment. Thank you.